Hi, my name is Mary Beth McGee. I am here with the Mississippi Poetry Society South Branch, which has given me the honor and perhaps to their regret the opportunity to speak with you about creativity as a poet. If you are on the Zoom meeting and not here in person, you didn't get a copy of our Creativity Bill of Rights. I'll have it right here. If you will email me or text me, I'll be glad to send you a copy, which talks about your right to be creative. A lot of times we throttle ourselves when it comes time to being creative because we get all caught up in rules and regulations and whys and wherefores, and we stop ourselves from being creative. No matter what you're writing, today we're talking primarily about poetry, but no matter what it is that you're writing, you have the right to be creative in your work. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Turn right.
The God-given right to be creative, the right to nurture your creativity, the right to apply your creativity to a variety of situations and circumstances. You've got the right to appreciate the creative results of others, and the right to use your curiosity as a divining rod to lead you toward creative discoveries in all realms of life. You have the right to express your creativity in safe and productive ways which do no harm to others. And you have the right to use your creativity to make your life, your family, your work, your community, and your world a better place. So today, as we look at creativity, we're going to be looking at it from that poetic point of view. And there are actually, I have a formula for creativity. Creativity is inspiration plus imagination plus information, and that gives you creativity. That's the formula. If you would like to pass that around to everybody who wants to copy it, can.
Great.
So where do we get these things? First off, inspiration. Well, I don't know about you, but I get inspired in lots of things, lots of places. We have the great good blessing to live here on the Gulf Coast, which is so filled with beauty and inspiration. And it's almost as if you could just flood yourself with it. I think about our current poet laureate, our poet of the year, and her beautiful book about the area. That's inspiration. Getting that glimmer, that creative piece into your life comes from what's around you. That means open your eyes. That means take it all in with your senses. It means use all of those senses when you're writing. Another place that we get inspiration comes from competitions. The most recent newsletter that we got, we have the National Federation of State Poetry Societies annual competition. 50, count them, 50 ideas for inspiration. What do? You look them over, take in the ideas of those titles, those headings. What are they looking for? So that when you take that in, you are getting all of the information and give it time to percolate down through your brain so that the ideas of what you've seen around you can come together with the ideas of what they're looking for and be able to work together to inspire you into those new ideas. One of my favorite writers, and no, he's not a poet, but Ray Bradbury. Okay, Ray Bradbury, amazing writer in a lot of different genres. And people would ask him, where do you get your ideas? And he was kind of like, where don't I get them? He had an office that was wall to wall things, pictures, statuettes, plush animals, documents, and of course, rows and rows of books. Those things were all around him. And as he said in one of the versions of the introduction to his television program, it was, "I'll never go hungry here." He had all of these ideas around him. And that's another place that we can get inspiration, by surrounding ourselves with things that we love. Now, those who know me will tell you that that can be a problem when you surround yourself up to the ceiling. I don't have Ray Bradbury's basement office to fill up, but I've certainly got the space around me filled up with things that I love, things that inspire me and give me ideas and keep me going. So for your inspiration, look around you and keep it close at hand. One of the things that you can do is take photographs. Now, a lot of us have gotten in the habit of storing those photographs online or on our phone. Now, here's what happens if the place where you stored your photographs goes under, or if you lose your phone or your phone crashes, you risk losing all of those things. So make sure you've got copies of them in a safe place so that you don't lose that inspiration from those photographs. Okay, another way that you can inspire yourself is just to get out and do other things. When we went to Natchez for our conference, when we go to other locations, we can pull in the feel, the soul, the smell, the taste of those places and bring them in, so that we are not only being there, but we're taking it home with us. Take your notes. Keep those notes in a safe place. One of the worst things that can happen is you don't have those notes. It was a great idea that I had, or it was a beautiful thought that I had while I was visiting that place, but what was it? Keep those notes. Keep them handy so that you can keep them going. Okay, so that's inspiration. Another one is imagination. Wow, where does imagination come in? Well, unless you're copying down a poem that someone else has already written, you're writing something new from your imagination. And that means turning loose all of those ideas. As I said earlier, don't fetter them, don't shut them down, keep them going. Children are they're great at this. If you've ever watched children at play, they don't need stuff. Yeah, when they get to be teenagers, they want stuff. But when they're kids, you give them a box, give them a blanket, they've got a fort, they've got a tent, they've got whatever they decide to play with. Turn it over and it's a train locomotive. Turn it another way, it's a cave. That's imagination at work. When you look at something, don't look at it and go, "Oh, well, that's a box." Look at it and go, "Oh, what can it be? How can I use this? How can I use the colors of that sunset? How can I use the aroma coming in off of the water? The fragrance of that rose that I just picked in the garden. The joy that those raccoons on the back patio gave us when we were last at Pat's. Those things can spark our imagination. I mean, we can look at them and go, "Oh, that's a cute little raccoon." Or we can go, "A raccoon. I wonder what that raccoon is thinking. I wonder what it's going to do next." Wonder is what leads us in imagination and lets us kind of cut loose and go from there. So don't be afraid to use your imagination. Start from A and go on to whatever. I grew up reading a lot of Emily Dickinson. And one of my favorite ones of hers is The Bird That Came by the Walk Today. You did not know, I thought. He bit an angleworm in half and ate the fellow raw. Now, how many of us have seen a bird eat a worm and thought nothing of it? She wrote 4 or 5 stanzas about this bird and what it meant in her day. That's imagination and inspiration working together. She saw the bird, she had the inspiration of the bird, and then her imagination went with her of what the bird was thinking and doing and what it meant to her. That's the beauty of using those moments to keep going, to write that next verse, that next poem. Use the images as we talked about. When you look at that image, what does that image say to you? What does it remind you of? In my book on creativity, I have a photo in there it was an accident that I took in Alaska. Now that photo was supposed to be a pretty river with some big rocks. When I got it developed, what I had accidentally caught was the pretty river and the big rocks and the trees rising and the mountains rising beyond the river. Every time I look at that picture, I'm back in Alaska. I'm back on that train, feeling the rattle, smelling the cinders and the smoke, and looking for the waterfalls along the way. That's what that inspiration and imagination can do for you. It can take you from sitting in the library meeting room to somewhere else, back to somewhere new, off to a memory. All of those things that come out of that creative moment. So don't be afraid to go back and look at those old pictures, look at the old programs, from those events that you've attended. Look back at them, let the ideas come. Now, our third thing in our formula is information. If you're going to write about something, you need information about it if you're going to get it right. Okay, if I'm going to write a verse about a parade, I need to know something about the parade. Maybe I need to look up the route that it took, or who was the king and queen that year, or what was the theme that year, to get it right so that somebody doesn't look at it and go, well, she wasn't even there. What does she know about it? She's got it totally wrong. We're in the perfect place for information here in the library, in the meeting room, because the information they have, the resources that they have, can help us fill in those gaps. The internet can help us fill in those gaps. Another bit of information that can help us is, don't get this wrong, but copying. When I was a teenager, well, actually before I was a teenager, I started collecting poems. Emily Dickinson, John Masefield, Edgar Allan Poe. I was a teenager at one point and, fell in love with Poe. How can you not love Annabelle Lee? But, the poems, the great classic poems, help us to learn patterns and meter, rhythm, rhyme schemes. And by copying them, and I've copied them out in longhand, I have a notebook full of them, because those pieces of information, not only the ideas of what they wrote, but the techniques of how they wrote, helped me to learn more about writing poetry. The more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. And that's the funny thing about learning. If you find the right subject and it captures your imagination, you can just keep going on it for a lifetime. And that's how poetry is for me. I'll never know everything there is to know about poetry, but I sure will enjoy learning a new thing every day, every meeting, every opportunity. And that information helps me to grow in my efforts to write poetry. You may be familiar with a series of books called Chicken Soup for the Soul. Now, they take poetry. I haven't had any poetry in there, but 20 years ago, actually about 23 years now, when that series first came out, I read the first book and I said, I want to write for these guys. It took me 20 years to get accepted the first time, but I kept reading the books. I kept reading the guidelines. I kept working with people who had been in it and letting them mentor me so that I could learn better how to meet what they were doing. Well, my fourth one will be coming out in January. I had to learn to fit what they were looking for. And that's, again, that information, learning from others. And that's what we do when we come together. We learn more. We learn our craft. We learn our skills. We learn inspiration from each other and encouragement. And that's all an important part of creativity. When we come to these meetings, when we get together, when we go to a conference, when, all of these things that we do, when we write, when we read our writing and share with each other and get feedback, we're growing. We're building that information bank so that we can make it to that next level. That's creativity at work. Building on what you already know. Now, I'm a corporate trainer by day job. And one of the things that is a primary rule of corporate training is adults learn best by hanging what they learn on the hook of something they already know. And that's what we do when we come to these meetings and we share our information. Oh yeah, I know how to do this. Now I'm learning how to do that. Now I'm learning how to take it to that next level. That's creativity at its finest. That's where we're going with it. Okay. Now, in the back of my book, I actually have a list. I'm going to find it in a minute, of resources that just are useful to me, and I hope will be useful for you. For example, there's an old Reader's Digest anthology. And when I say old, it was like 1948. My mother had it, and I grew up reading that. It's called Getting the Most Out of Life. Very inspiring, because it's stories of people who are not just going through life every day, but they're excelling at life. And one of them, for example, is an elderly man who works on a tugboat. And when you go down into his engine room, everything about that engine glistens. You can shade yourself in your reflection in that engine. And when they asked him why he did that, what made him keep it so clean? It's just going to get dirty again. Same with me. I got a pride. And that was his thing. He had a pride in what he did. And so even though he wasn't signing his name to it as we do to our poetry, he had a pride in that work. And that's what we need to have. And that's what our creativity can let us have, is that pride, that passion, that excellence that we want. The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. And of course, the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. Now, don't think I'm crazy, but The Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. If that doesn't inspire you, there's not much that will. There's a series called The Power of Story by Laura Ann Ewald on the different aspects of telling a story, which our poetry often does. On Writing, a Memoir of the Craft by Stephen King. Tell Me What You See by Carolyn Topperman. And Carolyn has traveled all over the world, taken photographs all over the world. She's put them together in a book with journal lines for you to be able to put your ideas, what's inspired by those photographs, together. And then finally, I've got one called Storytime, Crafts, Games, and Gifts Using Recycled and Inexpensive Items. That is just, it's totally insane because remember I said, up to the ceiling? A lot of it is recycling stuff. And these are the things that we did when we were kids that are being lost because now everything is prepackaged and pre-cut and battery operated. That's what these are, those old crafts that we used to do. And if you are into very strange things, there's a website called Atlas Obscura. And I love it because every day they send me an email with 2 or 3 really odd places or things. And I've learned about some fascinating oddities that just, boggle my mind. And it's little stuff that's never going to make the main newspaper because it's just interesting stuff. But atlasobscura.com. And I promise you'll have a blast looking through that. So we put all the pieces together. Inspiration, information, what am I forgetting?
Imagination.
Oh, imagination. I can't imagine that I forgot that. Thank you. To put together for our creativity. So I would ask you today to make a commitment to yourself to take advantage of that Bill of Rights. Exercise your rights to creativity. Don't let anyone, including yourself, squash it. Life will try, but don't let it happen. Thank you so much for sharing your day with me, your time with me. I appreciate it. Keep writing, keep rhyming, or not, as the case may be, and keep being creative. Thank you.